Ready graphics? Ready theme? Cue it.
Good evening. For your information tonight.
Hi, I'm Jesi Mullins.
And I'm Lauren Milberger.
And this is FYI,
the Murphy Brown Podcast.
There's still time to learn.
It's a scrappy little season.
I do Foley as a side job, just kidding.
Murphy Brown's first Emmy-winning season.
Jim is my favorite, and he is perfect, and I love him.
It is a really great season.
We love season 2.
Look at us.
Who knew? Who knew?
Hello, this is Lauren.
And this is Jesi.
And welcome to the season 2 recap. Wow, we're here.
Who knew? Who knew?
Who knew?
We could. Honestly, we knew.
Look at us.
Live your life at your own pace. There was a lot of things that happened, y'all, and we're so appreciative that you joined us on the journey through this. We love season 2, so it was honestly worth the wait for us, and we truly hope that it was worth the wait for you.
Yes, we were itching to come back. It was nothing about wanting. We really, really are excited to be here for, which is interesting, Murphy Brown's first Emmy-winning season because they won Best Comedy.
Finally,
it's
after
so funny
two
that we
seasons.
say
finally. We're like, finally, because we know in retrospect that they deserved it.
Yes, and it's I think really very telling, right? Because it is a really great season.
Yes,
I think we've talked about this in the show itself as opposed to in this recap. So apologies if I am repeating myself, but the concept of that a season 2 and even a season 3, but particularly a season 2, is when you get to sort of build on the characters you've already created. And so there's a little bit of a shorthand and it becomes more character-oriented comedy. Not that there weren't character-oriented comedy in season 1, but I just feel like unlike other shows that I've watched even, the difference in quality of season 1 and season 2, even though season 1 is really great, I feel is a really sort of large valley for me.
Yeah, well, I think the difference is that the character-driven comedy in a first season is all about establishing why these character quirks are funny, why these scenarios are amusing. Whereas in the second season, we now get payoffs to patterns that we recognize. So seeing Jim go on roasted, like those things are funny because we know Jim. Like the things, Miles' Big Adventure is funny because we know Miles from season 1. These are things that we are laughing at because we have a history with them now. So they're more satisfying character payoffs and I would say season 1 even actually pulled some of this off with the finale of season 1.
Agreed.
The full circle that they created, which is such a testament to the writing because that type of season end payoff normally feels like it's a farther down the road. So the fact that they were able to pull that off is proof of why it deserved to have the seasons it did. But season 2 just feels like, our friends are back in a way that you don't get in season 1.
Yeah, and being able to sort of watch it linearly like we are to see, there actually is kind of a bit of an arc with Jim, particularly in the first half, with Roasted, but also with Anchors Away, of something very real, of him sort of questioning his place in the world. But also sort of, and also, you know what? Let me take this back a little bit. I would also say that the episode On the Road Again is also him questioning his place in the world, but his place, I don't want to say virility, but you know what I mean? In his private life, right? Like about being relevant privately as opposed to being relevant on camera in his job.
Shocking absolutely no one who listens to this. Jim's arc is my favorite part of the second season. And I think a big part of that is actually what I said in my remarks about the passing of Charles Kimbrough, which is this is when we really see him at the crossroads of what does my relevance mean and do I care? And none of it has to do with whether or not someone else took his relevance from him. It's just him doing internal reflection and you're watching it come out in the way he responds to the world around him. And it's so satisfying to watch the fact that we gave kind of the elder statesman of the cast this very subtle arc throughout the season that shows up in specific moments in specific episodes, but it really is, they allowed, and Charles Kimbrough took the opportunity of having this emotional arc throughout a season that I don't think you necessarily notice if you weren't looking for it. It's just a nice kind of, subplot storyline, but that's what they were able to do with the second season because we've set up these characters and now we can kind of watch them breathe more life into their existence.
Agreed. And then also a second season is a great time to meet people's parents. Even though we've already met
Oh,
Murphy's mother, we
yes.
get to meet Murphy's father, which is I think one of the highlights of the season, Brown Like Me.
Yes.
And we do sort of meet Corky's parents, at the end of the season. I don't think we meet them in the same sort of depth
Mhm.
that we do, obviously, with Murphy, but it's such a great way. What is it on the Ted Lasso line? I love meeting people's parents because it's a it's a guide to why you're so crazy.
Yes. Well, and I like this like season 1 to season 2 comparison that we're doing is especially when you have a character whose parents are not together, very
Hmm.
commonly you meet the one and then you're left wondering what the other one is like because you've heard about them. So having met Avery in the second season to get to meet her father and see what they're like, that's such a brilliant way of using this split parental unit.
Yes, and I think also what makes it so lovely is that scene when they do sort of come together and they almost kiss, and you rarely see that when you have sort of fighting couples, right? You
Mhm.
you you get a sense of like why they got married, and and yeah, it wasn't all so bad.
I really love Brown Like Me. It's well, and Lauren, I don't know if you want to speak to this when it comes to Emmy submissions, Emmy wins.
It's so
We know
funny.
somebody else really loved that episode.
Yes, so that actually was the episode that Candace submitted. You can submit up to an hour for lead actor, and then you can submit up to 2 hours, which would be 4 episodes for supporting. And so she submitted that particular episode. Now, I have noticed that sometimes they will just submit one, right?
Mhm.
But technically, you can submit an hour. So she submitted Brown Like Me, which again aired as an hour. It wasn't a two-parter like it is in syndication. Now, on that subject, I always think it's interesting to talk about what episodes people submit. So if people don't realize it, that technically people are being judged on the episodes that they submit because most people just don't have time to watch an entire season. It doesn't mean that the person who's voting hasn't seen the entire season. So to say
Mhm.
that they only won for that particular episode is a little bit of a misnomer, I think. But some people maybe don't watch the show, and so that's their only introduction.
And it is truly like if you've ever done jury duty, like you have to make you have a framework with which you are asked to make your judgment. And so when people do a submission, you are being asked to consider this when considering everything else.
So the nominees with Candace, and she won the Emmy that year. So this was the second time she won, 2 years in a row. We have Kirstie Alley for Cheers, Blair Brown for The Days and Nights of Molly Dodd, which is a show that I think that sometimes gets lost. Like the first season was on NBC, but then it was on Lifetime, I believe, after. But many people
Mm.
see this as, even though it was a drama, as sort of a precursor to Murphy Brown because of the similar situations that she was in.
Mhm.
Delta Burke for Designing Women, and then Betty White for The Golden Girls.
Oh, what a group.
Yeah. And then Best Supporting Actor, which we talked about in the episode with Alex Rocco, because it was so funny that Alex Rocco guest starred on the And the Whiner Is episode as his character from the one season series, The Famous Teddy Z.
So specific.
And then went on to beat Charles for the Emmy. And I don't know why I thought that was funny.
Mhm.
But he submitted Anchors Away, Roasted, and On the Road Again, which is his entire arc, right? So
It's
that
and
makes, yeah.
man, if you wanna have a good like gym-centric day, just watch those 3.
Yeah.
Oh, so
And to
good.
remind people, unlike when we started season 2, you can now watch unedited, so
Mhm.
these are cable copies online via the internet database, and we have that link on our website. So definitely check that out so you can follow along with us, which is very exciting until they take it down. Hopefully they won't.
Mhm.
Now, Faith was nominated as well. She lost to BB Newirth in Cheers. And her episodes were And the Whiner Is, Bad Girls, and then Going to the Chapel parts 1 and 2. I agree
Mhm.
with those submissions. Those are great.
And also I agree with how do you go up against BB Newirth and Cheers?
It's really hard.
Like
Really, really
how do you
hard.
do it?
But also she was up against Julia Duffy for Newhart, Estelle
Mhm.
Getty for The Golden Girls, and then Rhea Perlman for Cheers.
Yeah, this was everyone has to remember this was like Cheers dominance.
Yes, and I went back particularly to remind myself what was
Because
what
Kelsey Grammer
season.
was also nominated.
Yes, but I wanted to see like what season of Cheers this was that they lost
Mhm.
to. And it's a major Robin Colcord season. That's a
Yeah, well,
good
and it's
one.
we also have Woody Harrelson for Cheers, Kelsey
Mhm.
Grammer for Cheers. Like this was during the time when like Cheers was a behemoth, and people I think kind of forget. People know that it's just ubiquitous as as a reference, but like this was during a time when like way to go if you go up against a Cheers nominated person
Oh
because
yeah, I
it
didn't
was
say you
a
mentioned it, but
beast.
I didn't mention that other than Kelsey Grammer and Woody Harrelson in that category with Charles,
Mhm.
also Jerry Van Dyke from Coach,
Yeah.
another show
Yeah,
that
that
kind of
was a
gets lost.
oh, Coach,
Coach was
man. What
great.
a time. I loved Coach.
hmm And people don't know Jerry Van Dyke is the younger brother of Dick Van Dyke.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Something I just wanted to touch back to. So Lauren was kind enough to pull a lot of great articles. So I'm over here on Murphy Brown, Anatomy of a Sitcom duty, our beloved book that we recommend everyone get.
Yes.
And so it has notes about the season 2 episodes. And one of the things about Brown Like Me at the end of that episode, I just want to read you a little excerpt about the episode itself because it
Oh
is
yeah.
such an excellent episode. And when I think of season 2, it's one of the episodes I consistently remember
Same.
without referencing. And it says, "This is probably the most ambitious script to date. It flirts with some well-known potential disasters, a high quota of sentiment, strong guest stars who must be meshed with the ensemble cast, twice the usual amount of time to fill. It works beautifully. Murphy's character is central to its success, hence why she submitted herself. We enjoy learning more about her all the time, and it is the writer's job, especially Diane's, to make that new information consistent with what we know, yet still a little bit surprising. It requires excellent writing, building on a firm premise." It's absolutely true. Like, if Colleen Dewhurst and Darren McGavin didn't work together,
Mm-hmm.
that episode never would have worked. But also, if Candace wasn't so good at playing off of them as their child, something we see a lot when we see guest stars come in is how the lead reacts to being around their parents and if they do. And she does, and actually Faith does great with this as well in Going to the Chapel. They both have the slight ability to kind of revert to a younger self around their
Oh
parents
yeah, we all
in
do.
a way where it's believable like we all do, and not in a way that is something like, who is this character now? I believe that this was a younger Murphy around them, but I still see the Murphy she became because of them.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And that scene with her and her father and him talking about like not being able to
Ooh.
talk to her and Candace isn't even speaking in that scene. And obviously I think, not that I know anything, about her, personal musings in her head, but like one could guess that that's something that she could relate to, a relationship with a
Mhm.
father like that. Well, I shouldn't say. She's talked about it in her books.
Yeah.
Just the look on her face while he's giving that speech is one of my
Mm.
favorite moments in the series, honestly.
Yeah.
And eventually when we get to, the plane episode when they think they're going to die and the montage, the place that's in also is why I love it because it's to the story arc of Murphy's life when you see that sort of in order,
Yeah.
plus some new scenes that they filmed of Murphy as a child with him.
Mhm.
Such a interesting, complex relationship, and parents are human too.
I think there's something that we obviously with, Devil with the Blue Dress and all that kind of stuff, we talk a lot about how Murphy and Corky are kind of placed opposite each other in a lot of scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I really enjoy that happens with them is also their relationships with their parents, their relationship with their mothers, their relationship with their fathers. And something that I find very interesting that I hadn't considered until I rewatched this season was the idea that they are kind of two different versions of a daddy's girl.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And the different, like, there's the quirky daddy's girl that we all kind of assume, which is a little bit like Daddy's Little Princess and a little bit more stereotypically feminine. And then you have the daddy's girl that I align with, which is somebody who is a lot like their dad and looks at their dad in a way that is less, I don't even know how to phrase this, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
I think I do, and
There are
sort of,
different manifestations.
yeah. And to add on to that, something that I hadn't even thought of until you mentioned it, because Murphy does have sort of a difficult relationship with her mother, which in season 1 would assume because they are very similar.
Uh-huh.
But often the parent in a divorce, the parent who is left to sort of be the actual parent, right?
Yep.
Gets the short shaft in a way because they have to be sort of the non-fun parent, but also they're the one that's there.
Mhm.
And so an idea of sort of a fantasy parent sometimes can be thought of because that parent isn't there and you long for a
Yep.
relationship with them. And
Yeah,
so,
the idea of
yeah.
like the disciplinarian parent versus the one who doesn't have to do that so they get to be the fun one. I think there's a lot to Murphy that I find interesting in which she often rejects her similarity to her mother. And I think there's also a lot about her being aspirational toward her father, in especially being someone who's trying to kind of shrug off stereotypical femininity. But I think there is something interesting. Murphy is such a perfect example of someone who is the perfect blend of her two parents
Yes.
and is regularly ignoring the stuff where she's actually the negatives that she is so similar to.
I just realized that Murphy's parents did not get a divorce until she was an adult. And so, I mean, semi-adult.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I forget in the first season, I think she says, I divorced him 15 years ago, or does she say that in season 3? But I think it's not as long as we
Yeah.
think. But that being said, I think the sentiment is still true because what they imply is that he was so busy at work that he was not a parent to her.
Yep.
So whether he was literally in the house, she longed for something because he wasn't there and therefore maybe revered him in a different way than
Yep.
Avery.
Which also generationally makes sense.
Yes.
Which is why, we love Avery, because Avery was like often a born at a different time type of gal.
Yes. Even for
And
her own time.
was not interested in the gender stereotypes.
No. And tells it like it is. Oh, God, Avery. But very quickly, so they were also nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Directing, Outstanding Guest Star for Morgan Fairchild as Julia St. Martin. That's Outstanding Guest Actress, I should say, because as we spoke about, just to remind people, because it makes me laugh and it makes me mad at the same time, as we talked about in Heart of Gold, the Emmy website and Thomas's website and anything you find on the internet, including my scrapbook. So it was back before the internet, says that J. Thomas won Best Guest Actor in a Comedy Series in 1990 for Jerry Gold. But apparently, according to Diane, because she was there, is like, no, Davin McGavin won.
Yep.
And that was because Gavin misunderstood, which I totally get why, that the guest actor category was being presented during the Creative Arts Awards, which is presented on the Saturday before the Emmys, because it shouldn't be there. And once we get to 1992, we'll talk more about that because there was a big controversy. That being said, it is in his obituary, though, that he won the Emmy for this. So someone had it somewhere that it was true. But
Long live Jay.
long live Jay. And
point.
because here's the thing, he in every press thing I've ever read, he's referred to as a 2-time Emmy winner, which
Yep.
he knew wasn't true. And it just makes me laugh, but it also makes me go, oh, well, it should at least be on the Emmy site. But anyway, mystery. So they were also nominated for Outstanding Sound Mixing, Outstanding Editing, Outstanding Writing, Outstanding Supporting Actress, as we said, for Faith Ford. And this is the one I needed to get to. Outstanding Achievement in Costuming for a Series. Because, yes!
Heck yeah. Yeah, it is.
And they did win the next year, but we'll talk about that later. Yeah.
This season had some costumes.
Some costumes.
And we just finished up going to the chapel, so like we obviously those ones, but also the fashion in general really took everything we observed in season 1 about telling the story of these characters through how they dress themselves to the next level. Like you now are like, that's a Corky costume, that's
Yes.
a Murphy costume. Like we're able to be like, oh, Murphy's kind of dressed like a Corky today. Like that, we start speaking in those terms because the storytelling of how they dress themselves is so clear by this point.
Yeah, I forget the episode, but I particularly remember what Murphy was in this lavender dress, and I was like, that is a quirky outfit.
Yes.
It feels like they're still figuring it out. But it feels like then when they finally got it, you were like, oh, this is sort of the signature Murphy Brown look that I know of from the rest of the season. And that's something interesting that I had not really noticed in another show, but obviously because that's what we're doing here is we're paying attention to that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I think it was really sort of interesting because now by the end of the season, we're into the really great chunky jewelry, the blazers that sort of, either match or sort of, go with another color of like a camisole or a shirt, skirt, pants.
Frank's jacket is just like front and center whenever possible.
He wears that particular, shirt, belt, pants thing that we have in the 90s. I mean, everyone wore that, but people know what I mean by when I say that. It's a very specific kind of shirt. Yeah, no, there's so many, I can't even pick my favorite because there's so many. And I also love how they kind of mix it up. Like, oh, well, the vest from Heart of Gold is being used without a jacket in this scene, but with a jacket with that scene, which obviously we all do. But sometimes you see on shows where nothing is repeated and you're like, well,
Yeah, and
that's
you're
not really believable.
Yeah, there are some characters where you can believe that they have an endless rotation of trending items at Quirky, and then you have other characters where it's a little perplexing that they seem to be that fashionable. So I think I like seeing the reusing, especially on someone like Murphy, who is practical and expresses herself through her fashion, but also I do believe would actually reuse something every once in a while.
Well, that reminds me of something that I was reading after Charles passed away about how he sort of originally saw Jim as someone who around the office would wear like, a sweater with the patches and be a little bit
Yeah,
more
yeah.
relaxed. But they sort of made him more of sort of a bit of a clothes horse in the
Uh-huh.
sense that he didn't dress flashy necessarily or lots of colors like Murphy, but very sort of tailored, very sort of like,
Well made.
well-made suits. And eventually it comes into the dialogue where he talks about getting a suit in Milan, and like he's
Mhm.
someone who really sort of understands men's fashion, which
Yeah,
is very particular to him.
well, and I love that it's understated classic men's fashion as
Yes.
opposed to other men that we'll see going forward who are trendier. Like he is someone who has classic investment pieces. He is somebody who would go to Milan for a well-cut Italian suit.
Yeah.
Like he's that kind of clothes horse.
Yeah.
Oh, so I have a question for you
Yes.
because we have talked about significant guest stars in that have come up, but there's one significant guest star that we have mentioned the actor, but we have not mentioned the character yet. And I
Oh,
thought you might have some thoughts about a gentle man, perhaps, who may have shown up at some point.
are you talking about Jerry?
Oh, Jerry.
I
How do you feel
mean,
about season 2, Jerry?
season 2 Jerry. So season 2 Jerry is really interesting, right? Because
Mhm.
the first time we meet him, which again I've said on the show, when the first episode that I met Jerry Golden was Heart of Gold. I did not see him in the first appearance on the show until years later,
Yep.
which of course is Whose Garbage Is It Anywhere, where he is a full-fledged asshole.
Yep.
So I always want to let people know that obviously clouds my judgment of Jerry.
That's okay.
And that's okay. It is a story that I think that we necessarily could not get away with today.
Yeah.
And I know the revival kind of tried to do it where Frank was dating a Fox host, but I'm sorry, a Wolf host, right? Or someone
Yeah,
on
Wolf.
Oops. But we mostly saw their relationship off screen, which was very sweet. And they didn't really talk about politics. Whereas sort of the core of Murphy and Jerry's relationship is that I would say they get off on the fact that they fight with each other.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Something I say as an adult and didn't articulate as a child.
Uh-huh.
But something that I found that was interesting that I remembered after the fact, but then I forgot about again, that I didn't mention in the episode, was something that Diane said as to sort of sparked her to come up with the idea that they should be in a relationship together, other than the fact that they felt on set that Jay and Candace had really great chemistry,
Yeah.
was she was inspired by Connie Chung and Maury Povich.
Mhm.
Which is like very funny. And just to remind people, Maury Povich he was the host at the time before. This is before he had, the talk show and like Who's Your Father and He's
Yeah.
Not the Daddy, was A Current Affair, which was very explosive at the time in syndication and was definitely tabloid journalism. And she says, he does stuff like that so explosive and she's so mainstream. What do they talk about at night?
So I would love to use this moment. You mentioned A Current Affair.
Oh, yes.
There's something at the season 2 wrap party that connects to that
Oh, please go
from
ahead.
the book. So the great thing about this book, we've talked about it before, but just a reminder, it's Murphy Brown, Anatomy of a Sitcom, an inside look at a classic in the making. So this was made, it covers seasons 1 and 2. It was made while this was happening, which is something really cool. It's a,
Yeah.
basically a physical documentary of what was happening at the time. But the book ends with the season 2 wrap party. And I won't read all of it to you. But one of the things I find very enjoyable is that it says the official wrap party occurs 2 days later, Sunday, in the newly refurbished Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, a landmark just across Hollywood Boulevard from Grauman's, now Mann's, Chinese Theater. There are some 200 people, cast, crew, staff, guests, and writers who crowd into the Blossom Room, site of the first Academy Awards ceremony, on May 16th, 1929. So the invitation for this cast party
Yes, please share.
is bright yellow, featuring a mock-up of a TV Guide cover displaying Murphy Brown 20th Anniversary Reunion Special, dated April 8th, 2008. The picture is a composite of the 7 members of the cast. The caption is Murphy Brown cast circa the late 80s. This cover lists articles to be found inside the Mythic Edition, and here are some of the articles inside it. The cast of Head of the Class finally graduates. Meryl Streep joins Knots Landing. Former President Quayle talks about his first week as a host of A Current Affair. And then Knockwood star Vanna White discusses her upcoming role as Lady Macbeth. And finally, CBS... Oh, God. Sorry.
What? I don't remember what.
The final one is CBS airs Dead Air Mondays 8:30 to 9, garners highest ratings yet.
Oh my God. You know, the Meryl Streep does television though is pretty accurate. It just
Right.
was 10 years too early.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me, some of these references that are like we would know today if you didn't have these references.
Yeah.
But some of these are so specific. The former President Quayle talks about his first week
Yeah,
as a host
that's-
of A Current
oh.
Affair.
Former President Quayle. Oh
Woo.
man.
Also, Vanna White getting called out. But something I
It's
find
also
really...
a dig at Candace too, though.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So one of the things that I find the most fascinating about this rap party description, and there's a lot of great stuff. There's stuff talking with Norm Gunzenhauser, who with his partner Tom Seeley had accepted a development deal at Paramount. The stage was set for later discussion with Russ Woody and Stephen Peterman, who confirmed that their agents were looking around in anticipation of news that Diane and Joel were unable to come to terms with Warner's for the 3rd season. So throughout this description of this book, they're talking about, will there be a 3rd season?
Yeah.
And it was active discussion. And they say, our initial interviews with Grant and Candace some 8 months ago had put us on notice that a cloud of doubt about the future was forming, but nothing really prepared us for the events we observed in March and April. Now at the party, everyone knew that this remarkable group of talented executives, writers, cast, and crew faced a somewhat uncertain future, not from internal frictions, but from failures in producer-studio negotiations.
Oh.
Joel felt he would, quote, know something by the end of the week, indicating there was a less than 50% chance that he and Diane would be back.
Wow.
This was no charade. By April 16th, the door to negotiations was closed. So at this point, like, there's a comment. Let me just find it real fast because I find it's laced throughout this, how everyone felt like they weren't coming back. And it said, for all but a few, the decision was beyond their control, but everyone with whom we spoke voiced concern. And they talk about how everyone had this look in their eye like it might be their last time.
Oh, wow.
And what I love is it says in the final 2 paragraphs, it says, yet as we look toward the 3rd season, we remember that these people are professionals working on the best half-hour comedy on the air. As we quoted Joel earlier, quote, television is a business. People move around. Are we still enthusiastic about the show? It's a terrific show. We love the people involved, but in this business, 2 years is a lifetime. And in fairness to Diane, she has prepared for this eventuality by providing a solid foundation for a continuing successful run. The special style and character of this series have been etched by Diane on her carefully engraved calling card to the industry. We can only hope that the indelible imprint can be tracked by a new team of producers and writers. And then a couple
Wow.
spaces down, it says, FYI, Warner Brothers has come to terms with Diane and Joel. They will return to Murphy Brown for the 3rd season, June 15th, 1990.
And part of that was a development deal for her to produce, her and Joel to produce more shows in the idea of becoming like their own sort of Norman Lear.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating to me that as this book was being written, as this was happening, as they were coming off of this incredible 2nd season, like, we know now that they just went on and were, and Candace just decimated the competition going forward.
Yeah.
But like, they didn't know. They all thought this might be their last rap party together.
But also it's sort of great is that, and obviously you always want to, in negotiating, right, to like be like, yeah, I would totally walk away. But the fact that like these are people who know them privately, right? That, and I understand that this guy is press, but still, like, the book was going to come out probably, they knew the book would come out later, right? The idea that like Diane and Joel were fine to walk away if they felt they weren't getting the worth of their talent.
And like,
or Diane's talent.
Yeah. And like, by the cast party, they thought there was a less than 50% chance. I also would love to see how this book would have been marketed had they not been renewed.
Yeah, and I remember, and I can't remember if it was in an email or if it was on our show, where one of the writers said that they were all sort of surprised that the writers of, because the people who wrote this book wrote a book on the Mary Tyler Moore Show,
Yeah.
which now in all the articles that I found, everyone keeps comparing it to Mary Tyler Moore, and Diane is like, I didn't really watch that show, so like, I was working and there weren't VCRs, so like, I guess you could compare it, but like I didn't watch it. I watched the
Yeah.
news. But the fact that, to see a show that's just in its first season and go, we should write a book on that is very risky. Like they believed that it was one of those shows that would be like a Cheers. Like even if the show hadn't gone 10 seasons, to think like in season 1, like, oh, this is going to go at least 5, like that's a lot to say.
And that I love that quote from Joel about how 2 years is a lifetime.
It is.
For sure. Like to be able to do a show like that for 2 years, to have that ability to tell a long form story as opposed to just writing a pilot and hoping someone will let you, being able to work with the same people, being able to kind of have some security for what, like two seasons of a show is something most people dream of. And so
Yeah.
I love that. I love the number of perspectives in this final wrap summary about what that felt like. And they didn't know. Like you don't know most of the time in this industry until you get a multi-year offer.
Yeah, and now you could be filming the show and they could not only cancel it, but then decide not to air it.
You could have completed the project.
Mm-hmm.
It could be completed. It could have been announced. The press is going, and it doesn't matter. They could just stop. So I appreciate that. I think people who are not in the industry don't fully grasp how tenuous it is always. It's let alone, trying to explain to people who don't know what it's like to audition, that you're just constantly going in for job interviews, like all that kind of stuff. Yes, but the idea that even when you think it's guaranteed, it's not guaranteed. We were talking about the Oscar nominations because we're recording this on Oscar Sunday, and there are tons of people that think that once you win an Oscar, you're set. But no, you could win an Oscar and then not get any offers for years. You could there's nothing set in this industry, and so I love. I mean, I hate to see people who are nervous and insecure and not sure if their job is going to be there the next month. But it's also wonderful to just see the honesty about it, because it's very easy to view people who are, finally at the top of the mountain, as we think, and be like, oh yeah, their life is so hard. They have a TV show. It's like, but they might not tomorrow.
Yeah, and I forget who it was, and I want to say that it was who just passed away, who won the Oscar for Cuckoo's Nest as the nurse. I feel like, and I could be wrong, I think that she told a story about how the day after the Oscars, she had filed for unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
Like she went directly to the unemployment office.
Well, for example, Kihi Kwan.
Oh yes, please.
Talked
That's
about
a better story.
No, your story is gorgeous. It inspired my story.
Oh, thank you.
So he saw Crazy Rich Asians. We know the story. It's been everywhere, and I love him, so I'll tell his story forever. But he saw that, went to his agents, and literally just booked Everything Everywhere All at Once, did this incredible role. And then the pandemic happened, and they couldn't release it. And so he wasn't booking job. He had booked this incredible job that now has skyrocketed his career. But at the time, the job hasn't been released. So he couldn't book more jobs because no one knew that he had this comeback in the make. No one knew that he was going to be this Oscar nominated supporting actor. He lost his health insurance through the union because he wasn't booking enough to keep his health insurance. So he's now Oscar nominated, hopefully Oscar winner, for this incredible genre bending, industry breaking movie, but no one knew. So he couldn't get health insurance for years.
And it's also a great example of perspective in the industry, right? Because he wasn't someone who was doing offers, he was auditioning and he wasn't booking it. And and to add on to your story, he said that while they were editing it, he asked the Daniels, wait, actually, I'm not sure if he asked the Daniels or his manager, am I any good in it? Oh, yeah, it was the Daniels, because they were like, why are you asking this question? Of course you are. He's like, because I can't book anything.
I don't know.
And so, right? And so there's this idea of well, people only want to put their money on a winning horse, which I fucking hate that thing. But like, people want to attach themselves to a winner. And he was still doing the same work in his auditioning that got him the role that's going to win him the Oscar. But because of some perspective, people didn't want to give him another
because
give
he
him a
wasn't.
chance.
They didn't want to bank on him because at that point, like they were like, talent is one piece of this process of this industry. He is obviously so incredibly talented, and everyone's like, he's so great. Then why wasn't he booking? Because it's not just about talent, and it's about the fact that they were going to give roles to people they could quote unquote bank on. And that's the injustice of this is now in retrospect, Beyonce.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
In retrospect, we're like, oh, all you people who missed out on this incredible man. But there's a reason. They knew, to them, they weren't missing out. And that's what's really sad.
It also could be underlying racism too, but
oh, I'm sure it was.
Which
but it's
about.
That incredible thing is that it's so easy for us. It's that same thing with, you look at someone's Instagram and you're only seeing the cultivated positive side of it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You can look at these people and be like, okay, they're a movie star. Like, oh no, you didn't have health insurance. The man wasn't a movie star then. He was just an actor trying to get work. It didn't matter what the project was. If the project doesn't get released, it doesn't matter. If your show doesn't get picked up again, you're back in the trenches with everybody else. Like, we really need to have this perspective for artists in general that nothing is guaranteed.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I mean, and that's a really good point too. I think that people, they don't really understand art as a job.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not only what you said, but it's also things like, oh, well, you should give me your art for free.
Oh, well, exposure can bite me.
Like, this is how I make money and eat. So like, I got to actually, make a living. Mm-hmm. And the answer is, well, then do something else. But you like what I do, right? Like you want what I give. So like, if you're not willing to pay me, you think I should quit?
Like, I'm sorry, where do you spend your money when you're not working? I'm pretty sure it's going to the movies. It's watching TV. It's doing all these things that who do you think makes those? Those people need to be able to feed themselves.
Yeah, but it's like people have this idea that like all actors live in a gated community and have lots of money, and it's like
and it must be nice.
Yeah, 1% of the SAG-AFTRA are like continuously working actors, let alone I'm not sure how much of that are actually movie stars.
Yep.
You can work with famous people, but that doesn't mean that you make the same money that they do either.
Yeah.
Like and that's also just a perspective thing we can talk about, but it comes down to that art needs to be respected. And maybe it's because people think it looks easy.
Yeah. Well, and bringing that back to the season 2, kind of recap that we are doing.
Yes.
This show, the reason that we have a podcast, these icons that, we are watching, working to this day, they didn't know at this wrap party if they would have a job the next day.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to read this and know the answer for them. But you're watching like this work that they're doing, and they're doing it unknowing. Like they are doing it knowing that it might be the last scene they shoot.
It's also interesting because I believe that on our show, Norm said that he regretted that he didn't stay past season 2.
Yeah.
But you understand, if this is what was going on, if they were offered a development deal, why would you take it if you think the job that you love might not be there?
Exactly. They didn't know at this point when they're like took this development deal. Joel is over there saying there's a less than 50% chance that they're staying. Like,
yeah.
I think you would want to take the sure bet as not as as someone from an artistic standpoint, as a human who wants a job, who wants to support themselves. You're going to have to go with the job that's available.
Yeah.
So all that said, please buy this book. Buy it used, please.
Yes, which is probably how you can find it, because I don't think it's
the only way to find
anymore. Yeah, eBay, Amazon, things like that. You can find
Bookshop.org.
That's probably a better option.
Thriftbooks.com is freaking great, and it's not Amazon.
Anything that's not Amazon would be great, but sometimes I don't know
sometimes
what
it's
to
the
say.
only option, and I understand.
Yeah. But something interesting looking back at these articles, which, by the way, I now have some of these that I wish I had when we did some of the episodes, but someone got a newspapers.com free week. And some interesting things, because we had talked about in The Whiner is that whole speech about Murphy that Corky gives about her being this old tree. It was sort of lifted off of Deborah Norville calling Jane Pauley an old oak tree. But something that also was sort of lifted almost verbatim is in Anchors Away, when the audio goes out and Miller has to sort of vamp. Apparently that was lifted verbatim from the first episode of Primetime Live with Sam Donaldson and Diane Sawyer.
Huh.
And it happened to Sam Donaldson. And I got to find that footage. Maybe I can cut it into this episode, or if not, put it on the social media.
Uh-huh.
But I thought that was really funny that they were like, oh, let's just take this literally word for word and make it comedy.
Brilliant.
And everyone will think that we made it up. But obviously with a Murphy Brown spin to it. Also, something in one of these articles, they were talking about like possible future ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them they ended up doing. But the one that I wanted to tell you about, Jesse, that we should chat about a little bit, was that apparently Harry Reasoner went back to school to get his degree because it bothered him that he never got it, but did it as he was like a working reporter.
Ooh.
And so they said they clipped out the article on that, and that they thought it would be a really neat, quote, story for Frank.
I would have loved that story.
Right?
Oh my gosh, Frank's neuroses being the oldest student in the room.
Yeah.
Frank like getting graded on something. Can you imagine the meltdowns?
Working on projects. A
my gosh, him
graduation
having to-
episode with his parents.
His graduation. I was going to think of like him having to do like group projects with like 21-year-olds.
It would have been a great arc for
Oh
him.
my gosh.
And I wonder if what happened was they just never got to it. And then when Diane left, that idea went with her. Like people just kind of forgot about it.
You know, he would have had a like 22-year-old classmate that he thought was really cute, who then referred to him as like her uncle or something. You know, like someone who
Or
like
called him sir.
yeah, called him sir, or like thought him as like a big brother. Like something like it would oh man. I want to write that fan fiction.
It would have been one of those like, where were you when Kennedy was killed?
Yes. And everyone was like, I was a wee baby. And he was like, oh God.
One of the Kennedys was killed.
Oh my
Anyway.
gosh. That would have been so good.
Yeah.
Diane, if you're bored and you want to just like write the fan fiction, I'll read it.
I mean, there is actually Murphy Brown fan fiction out there.
Oh yeah.
It's old,
Oh,
but
there is.
But it's there. And also something interesting is they do talk about in some of these articles that they are aware at the time that the downside of doing such a topical show, that it might not play in syndication. And I thought that was interesting because I think a lot of us, at least me, thought when we interviewed people for the show that that was a new idea that they came up with, that like in retrospect, they realized, oh, that wasn't a great idea. But it sounds like they knew it while they were writing it, but they just felt it was the best avenue for a show about someone in the news business, but also just like wanting to do really good work and being like, well, we can't think about the future.
Yep. Well, and I think what it did I think there's definitely a time period where it became dated and maybe possibly uninteresting, but now it's aged well, and now it's a period piece. You know,
I agree.
And
yes,
I think it's something that happened as well with West Wing.
I was just going to say that, Jesse. I was just going to say that
because when I do West Wing rewatches, I think there was a point where I was like, ooh, this is dated. And now you look at it and you're like, wow, some of this is still relevant. And now as kind of a period piece, it's really profound in a way that it was just topical at the time. But now it's incredibly profound to be like, wow, we're still talking about that.
And I also feel like it goes back to two things. It goes back to a lot of the political references, unfortunately, still resonate today.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if they it's not like you miss the story because you don't get one joke.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think it goes back to what the staff of Cheers used to say, which is one of my favorite things about comedy writing, which is anytime they would have sort of a very sort of intellectual joke, they would follow it up with a lowball joke.
Yep.
So that the people who were laughing at the highbrow joke wouldn't feel lost because they're still laughing when the other joke happens. And then the people who were laughing at the lowball joke but didn't get the highball joke don't realize they didn't get it because they're now laughing at something else.
Yep.
And
it allows everyone to feel included.
Yeah. And I feel like Murphy does that also.
And I think that's something that, you know, and this makes complete sense because of who we're looking at. But I think that's something that Frasier always did really well. For being such a highbrow comedy of intellectuals, it had both types of humor. Because you had the intellectual humor, but it was also a lot of the like lower brow comedy was at their expense because they were such idiot intellectuals. Like they were still idiots. And that's why it was funny. And I think that these shows that we love for the same reasons all were able to do that.
Yeah, and that was why it was so smart to have Frasier's father be sort of this blue collar guy, not just
Yep.
because that creates conflict, and you need conflict for story,
Mhm.
but also because then you had the two types of comedy there. Because if it was just Frasier and Niles being Frasier and Niles, I think
Oh, it'd
a
be
lot of
so
people would
boring.
get lost. It would be really boring. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you'd just be like, yes, yes, you're both so, so smart. You're so smart.
Yes. So one last thing that I found that was really fascinating to me, because I was the one who did the sidebar when we did Murphy Went to Jail and talked
Mhm.
about the journalists who went to jail. And I don't see why this was a mistake, because of course I was thinking like 80s on, right? Because that would have
Sure.
been their influence. And then talking about more influences today and how it's changed, because there is such an attack on the First Amendment in modern times.
Uh-huh.
But apparently in an article, Diane said that they were inspired by a reporter named Marie Torrey. And I thought, oh, I must have missed this. This must have been like maybe it was in the 70s or something like that, even though I looked around that time as well. And it took a while for me to Google them. But this is a case from 1959.
Oh, no. So I'm sorry. I'm just going to, because full transparency, everyone, I have no idea what she's about to tell me.
Yes.
So I did see a wicked glint in her eye, which makes me very nervous for my personal opinions. So we're in the 1950s, and it's a woman who went to jail?
A woman who
A
went to
woman?
jail.
A female reporter?
A female reporter. And do you want me to tell you the name of the case first?
Oh, goody do. I'm going to guess what it's for. Go for it.
Garland versus Torrey.
Garland? Oh, God, just tell me.
It's Judy Garland.
No, I was so nervous. Oh,
I
God. I didn't want it. I wanted it to be physical Garland. I wanted it to be like she didn't decorate for the holidays well, and because she was a woman, they sent her to jail. Like
it gets worse, Jesse. It gets worse.
Go for it.
And this is not a reflection on Diane being inspired by this. I totally see why, because it's up until recently, until 2014.
Yeah.
She was the reporter who had been in jail the longest amount of time. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's about the subject. I think it's about her place in history as a journalist.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to say that.
Every reaction I'm having is to the real life events and not to Diane or Murphy Brown.
Exactly. So Judy Garland brought an action against CBS, funny enough, in district court, because Torrey had claimed that the reason that she was tentative about doing her most recent television special was because she felt fat.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Marie, may I call you Marie? Not cool.
Although, and this is just me guessing, I think it is a bit of a testament of the kind of beat that women could only do at that time, which was gossip and style.
Yeah. And it's, the phrase like women on women violence.
Mm-hmm.
It's that thing of Marie Torrey probably went in wanting to be the Jim Dial of her age. Went in with every intention to be as legit and hard-hitting, factual-based investigative reporter. And the only thing they would allow her to write about was other women, what they looked like, who they were sleeping with.
Yeah. And listen, Barbara Walters talks about that on the Today Show, that was all they would let her really do.
But,
I should clarify
also
that
knowing Judy Garland.
I should clarify that Torrey actually worked for the New York Herald Tribune. The reason that Garland brought the suit against CBS was because a CBS executive was quoted. So that was her source.
Oh, wow.
Interesting, right? And so when she refused to reveal her source, Torrey went to jail for 10 days. For 56 years, that was the longest that a reporter had been in jail until October 2013 through March 2014, when a reporter went to jail for 155 days. So that person broke Torrey's record.
Here's the thing. While I think that writing about someone's body and where they sit on a body type scale is abhorrent and shouldn't be lauded, and they probably deserve a non-physical smack of some metaphorical sort, the fact that is the person who was in jail the longest as a reporter for that is also slightly abhorrent.
Yes.
I think my biggest takeaway from this is twofold. I think that this is a scenario where I think the short version is this is a scenario where no woman wins here.
Very good point.
The
Agreed.
the object being spoken about, the woman who has been objectified and reduced to her private and intimate obstacles and how that affects her outward work and appearance is a victim of this. And so are the women who have been told that this is the only way that they can make it in their chosen profession. I don't know the full nuance of Marie Tori's side of this, so it's hard to fully support and call her a pariah, and also it's hard to fully condemn her because I don't entirely know how much she was gung-ho about this being how her career turned out. But I
Yeah.
also think that it is messed up that the person who was in jail the longest as a reporter was a woman who was doing essentially highbrow gossip. I do think it is harmful. I do think the way that we talk about public figures' bodies is harmful both to the individual
Agreed.
and also the people consuming it. But I think that there have been some other incredibly problematic and damaging things that have gone out there by reporters. That the idea that that's the longest until, what did you
Yeah.
say, 2014? That's bananas.
Technically 2013, because it was the end
Yeah.
of 2013, because it was 155 days from the end of 2013 to the spring of 2014.
So that I find mind-boggling. Not to diminish the harm that was probably caused by this, but I've seen a lot more harm.
Yeah. Like if I had just found, again, if I had just searched a little bit higher up that, or honestly, I may have even just like known that it was a thing that was taken, but didn't think that it would be inspired by someone that far back. Right. But anyway,
Yeah.
I think that if someone had come to me and just said, hey, the person who was in the jail the longest before recently was an entertainment reporter, I would go, you're lying.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like of all the precisely. There you go.
Yeah. It sounds like a joke.
It does. And it really shows what we actually care about and will actually get behind. It's much easier to get behind the injustice of entertainment reporting than it is political and social.
But I think it also comes down to the point that like if this was either happening today or we were back then, not that we'd have our modern sensibility, but you know what I mean, is to say, I don't agree with what you did, but I support your First Amendment right to not reveal your source.
1000%. And honestly, that is happening right now. It does happen right now.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that it's, again, when we look at, this is such a tangent, but I promise it makes sense. The way that we finally put mobsters in jail was not for the mob crimes
you
that we
go.
wanted them in jail for, but it was for the money laundering and the tax evasion. It's knowing the reason why she was put in jail is a lot easier, I think, to come down on a side about. Because while I don't agree with what you were writing about or how you were writing it and the fact that you let your position do these things, I do agree that you have a source and you're not going to reveal it.
Yeah, because technically, like Murphy, she was held in criminal contempt.
Yep. And the fact that it was an entertainment person, that really
Yeah,
blows my
I
mind.
know.
That really blows
Like-
my mind.
Like Mary Hart.
Yeah,
Like, what if Mary Hart was arrested? And put in-
exactly. Like, of all that, truly mind-boggling. And you know what? I thank Murphy Brown for how many years later pointing me down the avenue to learn this information.
Right? This is why you listen to the podcast. Because not only do we talk about our favorite show, is we inform you about interesting facts and trivia and history.
There's still time to learn. There's always time to learn.
We are the companion. All right. So I guess we'll close the book.
We shall
I'm s-
literally close
The book. Would you like to close it, Jesse?
1 second.
Well done.
Thank you so much. I do Foley as a side job. Just kidding.
Yeah. On season 2, do you have any final thoughts to talk about season 2 as we wave from the shore?
From the shore as its anchors are away. I will say I really loved rewatching this season and seeing what it was like to watch this show start to find itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think it had one of the strongest first seasons I've ever seen on a show, but I felt everyone sit back and just breathe because now they knew who they were, they knew what they were doing. The payoffs were so so satisfying. The new character arcs, what being able to see a show that gave everyone essentially some form of a character arc in its first season, give them new arcs that weren't just kind of telling the same story. Like Corky always has the same story. It goes from A to B. Being able to see them already prove that they're not going to do that, they're not going to recycle things, was so exciting to watch and shocking no one. Jim is my favorite and he is perfect and I love him.
Yes.
How about you?
For a season that I first started watching Murphy Brown, so that I don't have a good memory of ever watching it in order, and seeing episodes that I later only saw in syndication. And that also, like, because I thought it wasn't my favorite season, I wouldn't watch it in order the way I watched season 3 and season 4 continuously. It was really very refreshing to revisit this in order and see these lovely arcs, to
Yeah.
see where everything sort of fit in, from Jerry to Frank to Corky to Jim. And I don't know if it's because, when Charles passed away, I think we both revisited a lot
Mhm.
of episodes, particularly cutting together the beautiful thing that you said. I don't know what to call it. The beautiful
Tribute?
tribute. It's just a
Yeah.
tribute. I appreciate Jim in a way that I didn't before, and I apologize for that to you.
Hey, all you're
'Cause
doing is giving the gift of love.
Thank you. But to see all of the sort of details that he has done throughout the season to become the Jim that we know, I'm so glad that we were able to take the time to really watch it in this way. And I now have a new memory of season 2, which is that I absolutely love it, whereas before I was sort of like hot and cold with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been a gift to be able to take the time, and that's I promise that's not us just like being like, see, it was fine that we took a while to
not.
no, genuinely, it was nice to not rush it, and to do it when we had the time and the capacity, because I think this season really deserved honest, sincere perspective.
Yeah, and I think also it's before the show kind of, got so much money behind it and became a little
Mhm.
more glossier, which is
It's
fine.
scrappy. It's a scrappy little season.
It's a scrappy little season. That's a great way of calling it. It's the scrappy season, and it's huge.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it is so many episodes. Like, they must have been exhausted. I just think about and so, like, thrilled to be exhausted. You definitely have that thing where when you find yourself in the middle of doing the thing you love, but you're exhausted, you're like, "Remember, I want this." But they must have been so tired.
Yeah, and Denise, it went so long that it went into her wedding, and which she was not
Yes.
supposed to. I mean, I'm absolutely sure she didn't schedule her wedding during the show. I think the show
No.
just went longer, and
Yep.
she was stuck. Like, people
Mhm.
made plans.
You have to make life plans. But yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really happy about this season. I'm excited to show it to my spouse, who is really does not know Murphy Brown except through me, and to just yeah, to hold this season in a different place in my heart. I love what it sets up, and I love also what it completes for certain things.
That's lovely. Well, you can join us on social media if you would like.
Mhm.
We highly recommend it. We put clips on Instagram and lovely pictures and funny things on the Twitter. So they're both different. So you can follow us
Yeah.
at both. We are at Murphy Brown Pod. Our website is murphybrownpod.com. You can email us any of your thoughts at murphybrownpod@gmail.com. Also, we would not have been able to do this show, pay an editor, do all of the behind the scenes things that help us bring this show to you without our Patreon.
It's so true. We cannot emphasize enough how much we appreciate the support. And it's there's getting likes and reviews, and then there's getting people who are actually literally investing in our work, and that means so much because it makes it possible for us to take the time. It makes it possible for us to do this, to give you the best quality that we can, and it's we see your names, they mean the world to us.
I know it's been a while since we've come back, but we thank you so much for being with us. Anyone who would like to join our Patreon, we post things once a month. We're also open to hearing what you would like to see on the Patreon. We also take one-time donations if it's not something you monthly would like to do. Oh, we literally just got a new one.
Hey,
It just
who's
repo-
that?
It just populated. Oh my goodness. As we were recording, screen name Lollipop just donated on the It Takes Two level. Thank you so much.
What up, Lollipop? Join
That
a
was such
very
a-
cool group of people.
I just upped the page and I was like, wait, it refreshed. What happened?
This is what happens. This is what you do to us. So, in honor of our patrons that we appreciate so much at the end of season 2, we wanted to give a little shout out to our public patrons, past and present. Lauren?
Yes, we'd like to thank Karen Goldberg,
I'd like to thank Lollipop,
Cassandra Albright,
Nicole Johnson,
Libby Brown,
Alexandra E. Arquetti,
Kate Hadley,
Kelly Nelson,
Christina Wise,
MTM Fan,
Nicole Mason,
Maria Oliva Cruz,
Cole Medina,
Shauna Brock,
Ashley.
BJ, and Amber Hammond.
We thank you so much for
So much.
staying with us. We know that there are other amazing, worthy causes out there. And so we are so thankful that you have helped us in any small capacity along the way. And also, please feel free to let us know what kind of Patreon perks you want, either to join or while you're on the Patreon. You know, we really are just sort of making it up as we go along. We try to put edited stuff and like early drops and like come up with cool ideas that sort of are sort of from the outline of the show. Like we just did one on Faith Ford on Night Court, but we've also done one on our favorite shows that we're watching.
We also want to acknowledge our private patrons and supporters. Just know that we are saying your names to each other, but we will obviously keep you anonymous as requested.
Yes. Now, if that ever changes, we're happy to mention your name, but we know who you are and we love you and we thank you so much.
We don't mean that in a creepy way. We know who you are.
We know who you are. The call is coming from inside the podcast. Yeah. And also, if you are just comfortable giving a one-time donation, that's also helpful. Just listening to the show, dropping us a review, which is free, is also very thankful and welcome. And we're just happy that you're part of the community. So we're going to take a little break before we post season 3, just so we can get ahead of the game and give you the best episodes possible.
Yeah, a little, between season hiatus, as we do in the biz.
And so season 3 will start July 24th.
We're really excited to talk season 3 with you.
Yes. Oh, are we?
Oh, are we? And we added something to the end of this episode. It was something that we shared on social media, but we really wanted the entirety of our listeners to listen to it in honor of Charles Kimbrough.
Yeah, and we edited Jesi's beautiful words to her favorite character to some great visuals of Charles Kimbrough. So we definitely recommend that if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and you can check out that video there.
And until then, here are some words I had for Charlie. Charles Kimbrough was simply a legend of stage and screen. As a fellow Minnesotan, he always felt very familiar to me. And while it breaks my heart to know I will never have met him, please go look at the tributes from those who did. What I want to talk about is why Jim is so important to me. In a show centered around a woman, a feminist and aspirational icon, why is Jim Dial, the remnant of a status quo that held women back, my favorite character? It's because of Charlie, if he doesn't mind me calling him Charlie. In Jim's shoes, Charlie brought kindness, and my favorite, a silly goose always bursting to be set free. Jim Dial was everything a feminist ally should be. He championed Murphy, not to get brownie points, but for doing it because it was right. He supported Corky because it was right. His insecurities of becoming an obsolete relic were from his own inward reflection and never because someone else took his spot. Jim gave me hope for how my future may be received. And the parts of Jim that made us all love him, the warmth, the flamboyant physicality hiding behind the mask, his chuckle when he made a joke, those parts were all Charlie.